What's happening? Nick Cattles with you here on a Thursday impromptu podcast. I figured, you know what? Wasn't supposed to do a podcast for the rest of the week. Labor Day weekend, working at 98.5 tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with Paul Perillo. But I can't move forward without doing a podcast when we've spent all of the last few months talking about the quarterback position, Drake Maye, Jacoby Brissett, who was going to start, who we thought should start. The news comes out today. I said I got to do a podcast. So thanks for joining me as always. It is very much appreciated. I can't quit you. Hopefully many of you can't quit me or this pod. Again, I'll be on 98.5 tomorrow, midday show, 10 to 2. Saturday afternoon, 2 to 5. Labor Day, 10 to 2 as well, doing that midday show. No pod tomorrow, no pod Monday. Don't forget, as you sit down, get ready to watch, listen to this podcast. Give that thumbs up on YouTube, like us on Facebook, like us on Twitter as well. Rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods, and throw a comment in. How do you feel about this decision? Are you okay with the decision to start Jacoby Brissett? Did you want Drake Maye to be the guy at Cincinnati? Let me know how you feel in the comments. I love seeing the comments. Helps engagement as well. So like, comment, and subscribe. We're about 100 subscriptions away. We've reached a certain borderline here. We're a little less than 100 away from hitting 3,500 subscriptions, which is the goal by week 1. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, rate and review. So Jacoby Brissett is starting. And I think that was the announcement that many of us were waiting for, right? I think almost all of us figured this was going to be the case, that Jacoby Brissett was going to be the guy at Cincinnati week 1. They were going to go with the veteran. They were not going to roll Drake Maye out there. They're being a little bit conservative with Drake. They have held his hand in some cases, maybe handled him with kid gloves, you could say. So I think many of us anticipated this being the announcement today, that Brissett would be the starting quarterback for your New England Patriots. And that's what the announcement was. Gerard Mayo, in about a 90-second kind of weird, awkward press conference, announced that Brissett was going to be the starting quarterback. And that's where we are at. How do I feel? I'm fine with it. I'm perfectly okay with it. And I think many of you who have watched this podcast or listened to this podcast would expect me to be okay with this decision. I am not in the camp that feels like you have to play Drake Maye week 1. I've never been in that camp. And I've always looked at this as a long-term developmental situation. And it certainly seems like Maye is ahead of the curve developmentally. But I'm not losing my ish. I'm not going bananas because Jacoby Brissett will be playing against Cincinnati a week from Sunday. I'm not going to go there. And I try to strip this down to its simplest form. I've been thinking about this over the past couple of days, getting ready for this announcement to happen. And I've been thinking about how can I simply explain why I think starting Brissett is the right call, is the right decision. And this is what I've come up with. There is a higher probability of ruining the rookie quarterback by playing him too early than waiting, right? If you wait, then you wait. What's the worst that can happen if you wait? He ends up not being good. Well, if you wait and he's not good after waiting, do you think he would have been good week 1? Of course not. If you start him too early, if you throw him out there and the rest of the team's not ready, he might not be ready, reading defenses and playing under center and understanding what's happening at the line of scrimmage, all of those things. There is a risk if you throw him in too early, you could, even though I don't think it would happen, but you could, quote unquote, ruin the young man. And there's a higher probability of ruining him by playing him too early than there is playing him later on. What's the risk reward? Think about what this season is going to be. I don't think any of us expect this team to be a playoff team. This is not about winning 10 games, 11 games, 12 games this year. It's about developing the young talent, seeing what you have, building off of this year into next year so you can compete, so you can hopefully be a playoff team by 2025. That's the idea. So what's the risk versus the reward quotient with this? I mean, what do you stand to gain by playing Drake Maye week 1? That you don't stand to gain playing him maybe week 6 or week 7, if that's what they decide to do. What do you lose? I just don't understand it, right? It makes a lot of sense to me to make sure that you are limiting the risk with the guy you drafted third overall and is the key to your future. If Maye works out, if he ends up being a bona fide QB1 for the next 15 years for this franchise, that's the most important thing that can happen to the New England Patriots. If he ends up swinging and missing, if Elliott Wolf drafted the wrong guy, if Maye never ends up being ready, if he was drafted too early and, the pressure got to him, whatever bad scenario you could paint, that would be a nightmare for the Patriots. The worst thing that can happen is that you miss on Maye. From what we've seen, I don't think they're going to miss on Maye. I wanted them to draft Drake Maye. I loved the pick at the time. I still love the pick. I think it was the right pick. And if you've been watching him through this preseason, he certainly looks like he's progressing. He is absolutely getting better. And so what do? I don't have a problem playing it safe because that risk reward, given the situation, you're not trying to win a championship this year. Nobody expects you to win a championship this year. So take your time. Take your time. The 2024 Patriots are not going to be very good. They are not going to be very good. We all, I think, understand that. So starting Drake Maye week 6 or 7 instead of week 1 is not going to make a whole hell of a lot of difference. I've got more thoughts on this. First, let's jump to a super chat. Charlie, $10 super chat. Thank you, Charlie. If the offensive line was performing better, do you think the decision would be different? I'm happy right now and always wanted Maye to sit for a bit. I don't think, even if the offensive line was better right now, I don't think they would have pulled the trigger on Maye. I think this was the plan. This was the plan from the very beginning. I've said, Charlie, as you know, this was not a quarterback competition. I know that Gerard Mayo was trying to sell that to people. I know the team was trying to sell it to the fans. This was not a quarterback competition. It was not a quarterback competition back at mandatory minicamp. It was not a quarterback competition throughout camp. Early on in camp, when they split reps, like the first week or two, said, oh, they're going to have a competition. I thought that, they're splitting reps. Maybe in a week or two, Drake Maye starts to take reps with the ones. That never happened. That never ended up happening until, last week on Wednesday. Literally, last week was the first time that Drake Maye took reps at practice with the ones. That's not the definition of a quarterback competition. He didn't take any reps with the ones at the joint practice. So I think this was the plan. This was the plan from the very beginning. We are going to slow roll Drake Maye. Now, was Maye a little bit more prepared and a little better than people anticipated him being? I think so. I think the Patriots, when they drafted Maye, they thought we might have to sit him for a full year. We might have to sit him. We might have to develop him the entire season. He might not play a snap of regular season football until 2025. I think at least some of the people in that building were thinking that way. But now they see it and they go, wait a minute, this dude might be a little bit ahead of what we thought he was going to be. So let's figure this out. What do we want to do? But I still think from the very beginning, they were going to slow roll Drake Maye. They signed Jacoby Brissett with the plan that Brissett was going to be their starting quarterback. Remember, before Brissett signed, there were all sorts of rumors and innuendo about Brissett ending up here, right? And almost every one of those stories painted it as, hey, Brissett could be your starting quarterback if the young guy isn't ready. We know that Elliott Wolf, he told everyone around draft time, they knew they were going to draft Drake Maye with weeks to go before the draft. Unless a team knocked their socks off, they were going to draft Maye at 3. They knew that. And so I think they brought in Brissett saying to themselves, we're likely going to land with Drake Maye. If we do land with Drake Maye, we'll have the veteran quarterback to start, and then we'll go from there. So I think that was the plan from the beginning. The offensive line and the issues they're having up front, I do think made them lean stronger towards Brissett as Maye was looking better than they anticipated. But I still think this would have been the result of camp in preseason, no matter what. Thanks, Charlie, for the $10 super chat. If you want to jump to the front of the line, you have a question, you have a comment. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Jacoby Brissett starting week 1. Throw a comment in. Always helps the engagement. And while you're hanging out on this Thursday early evening, give us that thumbs up on YouTube. Like us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Another super chat here from Cool Genuine Phil. Sup, Nick? I'm out here in Bay Area. Drake versus the Niners. I don't think that's going to happen, Phil. I think now that Brissett is starting, we can certainly plan on him sitting, Drake Maye sitting for at least the first month of the season. At least the first month. And we've gone through that schedule. We've talked about it. If you're just joining us for the first time, I'll quickly explain. Week 1, obviously, Cincinnati, pretty tough defense. Lou Anarumo, a guy who is very respected in the defensive coordinator world, who could throw a lot of different things at quarterbacks. You've got to go against him in that defense in week 1. And then you've got Seattle and Mike McDonald, somebody who throws all sorts of exotic schemes at offenses, will blitz and throw guys at you from different places. And he's someone that would throw the kitchen sink at Drake Maye in week 2. So I don't think Maye will be out there week 2. Then week 3, you're on a short week against the Jets, a very good defensive team. Robert Saleh is a very smart defensive coordinator. He will bring the heat to Drake Maye. So I don't think you start the rookie on a short week, play Thursday night football against that Jets defense. I don't see that happening. And I also don't see them saying to themselves, we're going to play Drake Maye week 4 at San Francisco against that Niners defense. So I think we all should just kind of sit and relax. And the Drake Maye stuff, him starting, I don't think will become a story until at least week 5. If Jacoby Brissett is playing well, I'm not sure it'll be a story until Brissett starts to fall off a little bit. But I don't think this is a situation where they start Brissett and then week 2 they go to Maye, or week 3 they go to Maye. I think Maye is sitting for at least the first month of this season. And I don't have an issue with that. I go back to free agency. I go through the offseason. And we talked about how much new there was, right? There was so much new with this football team, especially on the offensive side. The offensive roster was completely stripped down. Heading into the offseason, heading into free agency, it was completely stripped down. You did not have a starting tackle. You did not have a starting wide receiver 1 or 2. You did not have a starting tight end. I mean, this was a cupboard that was empty. An empty cupboard offensively. And I bring you back to that because I think it puts everything into perspective right now. There's so much new going on offense. They got to figure out what they've got. They've got to figure out who they are. And you can figure out some things at practice. You can figure out some things during a joint practice. But really, as Bill Belichick said, and many other coaches in the league would tell you, you don't know who you are until you get through like the first month or so of the season. After the first month of the regular season, you start to figure out who you are, what you do well, what you don't do well. Some of the guys you thought that were going to be a part of the plan end up not being part of the plan. Some of the guys that you didn't think were going to be big pieces of the puzzle end up being bigger pieces of the puzzle. So you take your time and you figure it out through the first month or so. And for this team, for this particular situation offensively, they're going to need that time. They've got to settle the offensive line. When can you get at least 4 out of the 5 guys up front to a spot where you trust them, right? Can you get 4 out of the 5 to work? If you can get 4 out of the 5 playing at least average football, you feel better about playing Drake Maye. How about the wide receivers? You look at that wide receiver room, there's so much youth, right? I mean, you've got Booty and Pop Douglas, second-year guys. Polk and Baker, rookies. Tyquan Thornton, third-year guy, hasn't played a lot of football due to the injuries. Kendrick Bourne is obviously on the pup. So if let's say this is the hypothetical. Maye starts week 5. A lot of people are pointing towards week 5. Well, by week 5, theoretically, by week 5, you should know who your best 5 offensive linemen are. They should have played together for a string of regular season games. You should have figured out some of the wrinkles that were causing problems, and you straightened out, you ironed out those wrinkles. Your wide receiver core, you might be able to get Kendrick Bourne back into the mix by then, week 5, right? Because he's on the pup. So maybe you have your best receiver, because Bourne is the best receiver on this roster. You have Bourne coming back. So now you give your rookie quarterback an offensive line that knows itself a little bit better, is more settled. You get your best wide receiver back onto the field for Maye. And you have also figured out the pecking order of all the other guys, right, that are in that room. Is Jalen Polk, for example, is he a legitimate number 2 guy? Has he built himself through the first month of the regular season? Has he proved himself through that first month of the season to be a guy that you can depend on week in and week out? KJ Osborne, is he dropping footballs? Is he an issue? Did Tyquan Thornton fulfill his potential and actually go out there and stay healthy and make some plays? Right? So it allows you. Did Javon Baker start to make a little bit of a push at practice and ends up getting on the field for a little bit by week 5? So it gives you a much clearer picture at the wide receiver position by taking the first month and figuring out what the hell you have. Does Polk leapfrog Osborne? Does Baker leapfrog Thornton? Is Thornton consistent, more consistent than you thought he would be? Is Bourne coming back? Is Kayshon Boutte giving you anything? Is he giving you any production? So you have a better idea. We always focus on the offensive line, but there's more that needs to be settled, right? There's more that needs to be settled with this offense. Figure out your depth chart at the wide receiver position. You might think you know it right now, but you might not. What if Jalen Polk is shot out of a cannon and he's playing great? So figure out the wide receiver room with all of those young pieces and how you want to slot those pieces. Here's something else that we don't talk about enough as far as settling and why Maye, it makes sense to not throw him out there to the wolves, so to speak, right away. Alex Van Pelt. Alex Van Pelt. I have an open mind for Alex Van Pelt. I think he's done a pretty good job throughout this camp. I think you look at the preseason play calling, as much as you can take from it, there are some intriguing things, intriguing pieces of his play calling that I've seen, and his development of Drake Maye, right? I think AVP's had a good camp just off of the development of Maye. Everybody will love Alex Van Pelt if Maye ends up being a franchise quarterback because he got him to develop well, and his plan inevitably worked, right? Even if it frustrated some people. But Alex Van Pelt has not called an offense week in and week out since 2009. Last time I checked, that's 15 years ago. I want Van Pelt to have a little bit of a rhythm. I want him to understand what works for him in his offense with this team before you have Maye out there. Let him figure out some of the issues that might pop up, right? Maybe he's not necessarily, I don't want to say ready, that would be the wrong word, but maybe he's got some things going on as a play caller that he has to figure out himself through the first month. So if Drake Maye goes out there week 5 against the Dolphins in front of the home crowd, hopefully at that point, you have at least 4 of the 5 offensive linemen that you trust. You now know what you have at wide receiver, and hopefully, fingers crossed, Kendrick Bourne is back. Alex Van Pelt has now had a month of regular season football to find the rhythm as a play caller, so he will be better than he was in week 1. Doesn't that make sense? Doesn't it make sense to put the rookie in that situation versus, well, week 1 against Cincinnati, we don't really know who we can trust beyond Owenu and Andrews on the offensive line, maybe Sidney So, right? Wide receivers, we know who we have and we know who we might want to have, and we think that this guy can do this and that guy can do that, but we're not really sure. We don't have Kendrick Bourne because he's on the PUP, so he's out the first 4 weeks. And our, play caller who hasn't called plays in 15 years on a week-to-week basis, we don't really know what his strengths and weaknesses are. He doesn't really understand his offense and what he can get out of these guys once the games count. A whole lot of unknowns still, right? Throwing Maye into that week 1. So why not take your time? Risk, reward. What do you get out of starting Drake Maye a few weeks earlier? I don't see the upside. I don't understand the risk-reward quotient. I'd rather have Kendrick Bourne back. I'd rather have that offensive line at least somewhat figured out. I'd rather have a Van Pelt who has called plays for the first month and now has a firm grasp of how to get through play calls and what he wants to call and what situations and who he trusts, right? Week 1, third down, does Alex Van Pelt know on a 3rd and 6 who he wants to throw the football to? Does he know? He probably thinks he knows right now, but maybe that answer is different week 5 than week 1. So figure this stuff out. And then you plop the rookie in. Here's the biggest story. By the way, don't forget to give us that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. If you love the content, help a brother out. Give me that thumbs up. Takes a second of your time. Doesn't cost you anything. Creates engagement, as they say. Throw a comment in. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you agree with me. Drake Maye, I want to know your thoughts. Are you disappointed the Patriots have decided to start Jacoby Brissett week 1? Throw your comments in. Subscribe as well. Rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. Here's the biggest story, and I'm even guilty of it because I just spent 20 minutes not even getting to the biggest story. Here is the biggest story about the quarterback situation for your Patriots. You ready? The biggest story is that we actually are having this conversation. The biggest story is that Drake Maye did enough in camp and in the preseason to make this a legitimate conversation, a legitimate discussion. If I went back to April, how many of you would have said, I want Drake Maye to start week 1? I'm sure there would be some of you. But how many of you would think that was a legitimate conversation to have? After all that we heard, right? Dan Orlovsky going on TV saying that Maye needs 2 years, not 1, but maybe 2 years to sit until he's ready. Guys that I respect, like Greg Bedard saying, it might take Drake Maye a full year. Redshirt him, right? I'll shout out 2 guys, Evan Lazar, Phil Perry, with my own ears, my own eyes. Lazar and Perry happen to be 2 buddies of mine in the business, but they were the only 2 local guys that I saw and or heard that came out and said, Drake Maye is more ready than people think. So shout out to Lazar, shout out to Perry. A lot of other people, especially nationally, a lot of other people were saying it's going to take at least a year for Drake Maye to start a football game. And here we are, right? More than a week away from week number 1 of this season, of his rookie season. And he has proven himself to the point that this is a conversation. That's the biggest story. And that's what you should be excited about, is that he is ahead of the curve. He's ahead of that expected learning curve that we had. I even said, hey, he might have to sit a year. I could see him playing late in the year, but he might end up sitting a year. And if it takes him to sit a year to be better in 2025, to be that guy for the next 15 years, by all means, then let him sit for a year. But week 1, we are here having this conversation. And people are disappointed that he's not starting week 1. Keep that in perspective. Think about where we were 4 months ago when Drake Maye was drafted. Think about where we are now, 4 months, when you fast forward. Very smart friend of mine said one time when I was struggling with work, sometimes I get ahead of myself. I want more right now. I'm impatient when it comes to work, right? And one of my best friends told me a great bit of advice, and I'll share the advice with all of you. Take a deep breath and take 6-month snapshots of your life, personally and professionally. Because when you get wrapped up in the day-to-day stuff, it tends to impact how you feel about certain things. But when you pull yourself out of that and you look at 6-month snapshots, it gives you a better feel for where you are in your life and what you've done. And so we get wrapped up in the day-to-day, and it's fine. I got a podcast to do today, right? Felger's got a show to do today. And we could talk about the ins and the outs. We can be frustrated, disappointed. We can love this. We can hate that. But still, every once in a while, you got to pull yourself away from that and think about the 6-month snapshots. 6 months ago, Drake Maye was getting ready for his pro day. And most of the football analytical world were telling me, we're telling you that Drake Maye was somebody who would not be ready year 1. Well, so far, October, Halloween, pretty much Halloween, will be the 6-month mark for Drake Maye as a Patriot. He was drafted late April, right? So you get to Halloween. If Drake Maye is starting for the New England Patriots by Halloween, that is his first 6-month snapshot as a Patriot. And it's a damn good snapshot because he's ahead of where we thought he would be, many of us. Think of it in those terms. One more thing I want to say about this before I get to the decision itself and who I think made the decision. Nobody, not me, not you, not the most pessimistic Patriots fan, nobody will care. Absolutely nobody will care if Drake Maye starts week 1 or week 9 of this season, if he ends up being a legitimate franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. We will not be sitting here in 2027 going, yeah, Drake Maye is like a top 10 quarterback. He's like a top 5 quarterback. He's a top 8 quarterback. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But could you imagine if the Patriots started him week 1 instead of week 9 that year? Is anybody going to say that? Is anybody going to care? I don't think anybody's going to care. Whether he starts week 1, week 5, week 7, week 12, week 15, nobody will care because everybody will care about the right thing. Did he work out or did he not work out? That's it. That is all, right? Like, comment, subscribe. I want to remind you, a week from tonight, next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, on this YouTube channel, I am debuting my NFL podcast. We're going to go NFL wide, baby. Not just Patriots. We're going to look at the NFL, and we're going to drink craft beer. Now, if you don't drink craft beer, you can drink whatever beverage you love, okay? It's a wide open environment. If you like water, drink water with me on Thursday nights. If you like whiskey, have a glass of whiskey. If you like craft beer like I do, have a craft beer with me. We're going to sit down. I'm going to sit down right at my desk in this lovely palatial podcast room. I'm going to pour myself a craft beer. I'm going to tell you what craft beer I'm pouring. I'm going to suggest that craft beer to you. I'm going to sit here and have a beer with you. Every Thursday night before Thursday Night Football, 7 p.m. Eastern, we're going to talk about the top 5 stories in the NFL that week. We're just going to talk NFL, talk ball, and have craft beer. Debut episode, a week from tonight, crafts and kickoffs, 7 p.m. Don't miss it. Alex Van Pelt made this decision. I don't think Gerard Mayo made this decision. Now, Gerard Mayo had to say yes or no to the decision, which you could say, well, that is the decision, but let me explain. Alex Van Pelt is the guy who I think said, we're going to start Drake Maye week 1. Right? If he said that, if he said, we're going to start Drake Maye week 1, I think Drake Maye would be starting in Cincinnati. Alex Van Pelt walked in and said, we're starting Jacoby Brissett week 1. Jacoby Brissett is going to start week 1 in Cincinnati. I believe Van Pelt is the guy. I believe Van Pelt is the guy who made that decision and said, we are going to start Jacoby Brissett week 1. Did you notice Gerard Mayo today when he made the announcement? He said, I have decided, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I have decided that Jacoby Brissett is going to start, will be the starting quarterback. The I, right? We made the decision? I've said this from the beginning. I think this decision fell into the lap of Van Pelt because he's the most experienced guy, most experienced offensive guy. He played the position for years in the NFL. He has worked with quarterbacks across the league. He's the one. He's the one that Mayo leaned on, depended on. Don't forget, Mayo, just a few days ago, he was telling us that Jacoby Brissett was outplayed by Drake Maye, right? And then Jory Epstein of Yahoo Sports wrote a story last week, came out, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, wrote a story. She wrote a story about the Patriots quarterback situation, and she spoke to a bunch of people in the building, right? Mayo told her a week ago, on August 22nd, Mayo told Yahoo Sports, quote, if he, talking about Drake Maye, if he beats Jacoby out, I mean, there's nothing else really to be said, unquote. Jerod Mayo said that a week ago. 7 days ago, he's telling Yahoo Sports, if Drake Maye beats out Jacoby, there's nothing else to really be said. Then, a few days after that, Mayo says that Maye outplayed Jacoby. So, going off of what Mayo told Yahoo, there shouldn't have been anything else really to say. But Drake Maye is the starting quarterback, going off of his own words. Alex Van Pelt in that same story. Do you know what he said to Yahoo? Here's what Van Pelt said to Yahoo Sports. Jacoby's, quote, way more equipped to handle the opening day, unquote. So riddle me this. Jerod Mayo tells Yahoo Sports if Drake Maye outplays Jacoby Brissett, there's really nothing else to be said, i.e., he going to be the starting quarterback. Meanwhile, Alex Van Pelt told Yahoo Sports that Jacoby Brissett was way more equipped to handle the opening day. Jacoby Brissett is going to start week 1/opening day. Who do you think made the decision? Who do you think had the call? Using their words. I'm not creating any of this. I'm not creating some weird false narrative. I'm using their very words. Jerod Mayo went on the record and said if Drake Maye outplays Brissett, there's nothing else to be said. A few days later, he says that Drake Maye outplayed Brissett. Meanwhile, AVP tells Yahoo Sports Jacoby Brissett is more equipped to handle week 1. And today we find out, 7 days after those two comments to Yahoo, we find out that Brissett is starting week 1. Who do you think made that decision? To me, it's clear. Jerod Mayo, I think, looks at quarterback play because he's a defensive guy. He was evaluating the quarterbacks because of their talent. Alex Van Pelt understands the talent, but he also understands the nuance. And this is not a shot at Mayo. He's just not an offensive guy, right? He never played the position. So Mayo is looking at Drake Maye saying he's more talented. And he played better when he was out there. So, I would lean towards that guy. Meanwhile, Alex Van Pelt is looking at it going, yeah, but there's all these different things, right? It's all these different things, Jerod. Line of scrimmage, under center, right? All of these little things. Is he still drifting in the pocket a little bit too much? Is he doing too much of this, too much of that? Did he have the wrong read on this play? All the nuance, all the finer details. That's what Van Pelt's looking at. So Jerod just looks at it and says, okay, talent. Think about a defensive mind, right? Defensive coordinators. I think Mayo, and this is just my opinion, obviously. I haven't spoken to Jerod. But I think Mayo looks at quarterbacks and says, which guy keeps me up at night? Right? Which quarterback out of those two guys, which quarterback out of those two would keep me up at night if I was a defensive coordinator getting ready to play us next week? And I think for Jerod and many other people, including myself, Maye would keep you up at night because he's more naturally talented. He can do more things than Brissett can. He's better off platform. He's got a better arm. He's a little bit more athletic. I think that's how Mayo looked at this. Which quarterback scares me? Which quarterback could beat me? And I could call the best plays. I could call the best defense, but that dude's natural talent just beat us. He was just better. I called a great game defensively, but he did a bunch of things in that game, and I just put my hands up and said, how the hell can you beat that guy? I think that's the likely way that Jerod Mayo framed this evaluation. And he looks at Maye and he says, he's more dangerous. He can beat me in different ways. I feel like as a defensive coordinator that I can attack Jacoby a little bit more than Drake. I can get the best of Jacoby. And yeah, I might fool Drake Maye every once in a while, but his natural talent, that can beat me. While Alex Van Pelt is looking at it going, yeah, he's got great talent. There's no doubt about that. But you can fool him. And how many times can you fool him? And if you fool him a bunch, now we're screwed. I think that's the difference here between the two guys looking at it. Don't forget, Gerard Mayo came out and said that Van Pelt is the head coach of the offense. I do not think, I could be wrong. Of course I could be wrong. But I do not think that Gerard Mayo, if Van Pelt walked into the room this week and said, we have to start Jacoby Brissett week 1 against Cincinnati because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I do not think that Mayo would look at Van Pelt and say, sorry, going with May. I just, Mayo knows he doesn't know as much about the position and about offense as Van Pelt knows. And that's why Mayo came out and said he's going to be the head coach. Alex Van Pelt is the head coach of the offense. He's running that side of the ball. I don't think Mayo would have disagreed with Van Pelt's opinion. So yes, Mayo's the face of the decision because he's the head coach. Mayo went out there this morning and announced it. But I fully believe if Van Pelt walked into Gerard Mayo's office and said, we should start Drake Maye against Cincinnati, Drake Maye would be starting against Cincinnati. And you go back to that Yahoo Sports story. Van Pelt said Jacoby was more equipped to start week 1. That was last week. Van Pelt, I believe, has felt that way for a long time. And he was the one that made that decision. He's the reason why Jacoby Brissett is starting week 1. That's how I feel. Because I think Mayo would have gone with whoever Van Pelt picked because he trusts Van Pelt. He understands that Van Pelt knows more about what he's talking to versus what Mayo is talking, right? He knows. I do not think Mayo would have gone against Van Pelt's word. I don't think he would have gone against Van Pelt's opinion. I don't think that would have happened. And I think Van Pelt was the driving force of this decision, a decision that I agree with. I have no issue with it. Give us a thumbs up. More engagement means more eyeballs. Thumbs up, liking the podcast, throwing a comment in. Maybe you think I'm crazy about the Van Pelt thing. Agree or disagree with Drake Maye not starting week 1. Patriots rolling with Jacoby Brissett. Throw a comment in there, whether you're listening live, watching live, or you're watching/listening on demand. All the comments help. And subscribe. Help a brother out. Subscribe to the channel. Trying to get to 3,500 subscriptions before they kick off the football in Cincinnati a week from Sunday. All right. Impromptu podcast. Think it went pretty well, but I'm biased. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you helped us out with the likes, comments, and subscriptions. Rate and review, Spotify, Apple Pods. Everybody enjoy your holiday weekend. I'll be on 98.5 tomorrow, 10 to 2. I'll be on 98.5 on Saturday, 2 to 5. I'll be on 98.5 Monday, 10 to 2. Lots going on. I appreciate every single one of you and your support. Rock the weekend. Talk to you soon. Nick Cattle Show.